welcome you all for the second part of our program. And in this monthly program, we have a theme for this talk in the afternoon. It's about relationships. So I would like to talk about what kind of place that the relationships have in our spiritual path. As you know that we are born with relationships in our family, and then we create relationships in our lives. And what is how these relationships, what kind of role that these relationships play in our spiritual path. Sometimes it may sound like relationships can be a kind of burden to our spiritual growth. Of course, there's a saying of the Buddha, when it comes to spiritual growth, Buddha says that be an island to yourself. Right? Be an island to yourself. Even there's an interesting saying of the Buddha in the Dhammapada. Neither mother, or father, or a relative can do a greater good than our own well-trained mind can do. So even a mother or father cannot do such a great help to ourselves than our own well-trained mind. So in that case, it sounds like, spiritual practice is something quite personal and individual, right? But then we get the question, in order to develop such a well-trained mind, because it's a well-trained mind that will do a greater good to you than your own parents or any other relative. So in order to develop such a trained mind, then we need help from others, including teachers and co-practitioners. Therefore, Buddha also has said that our spiritual friendship or spiritual companionship is the basis for our whole spiritual growth. So on one hand, you have this emphasis on personal, training. On the other hand, we have this emphasis on having help from teachers and co-practitioners and community. So then we come to, we have this question: are relationships a burden to our spiritual growth, or are relationships a blessing to our spiritual growth? What do you think?
It can go both ways.
Great, yeah, thank you. It can be both ways. It can be a burden, it can be a blessing. It depends on us how we deal with relationships, right? How we relate to these relationships, and that's the key here. So I would like to talk with you a few instructions that we can get from the teachings of the Buddha, because in order to work or make our relationships a part of our spiritual practice, we need some understanding on that. Of course, relationships can here mean, wide variety of relationships, definitely our family relationships, and also relationships with teachers and, a larger community, friends. So all are like some kind of, connection, some kind of bond. Then how we, as you mentioned, it can be either a burden for spiritual growth or can be a blessing too. So what's the best way to handle them? And there's a saying that, the perfect match can be done probably between a blind wife and a deaf husband. because the blind wife cannot see the weak points of the husband when she's blind, and the deaf husband cannot hear the nagging of the wife. So they can, that can be the best match. Actually, when we start a relationship, we partially become blind and deaf. That's why they work nicely. But along the way, you develop the acuteness of your senses. And your blindness is gone, and you begin to hear certain things, and then you start the problems, right? So of course we cannot remain blind and deaf, forever. Of course, when you start a relationship, definitely you are blind to all the weakness of the other party. You only see the goodness. You purposely ignore the weakness of the partner. That's what that is how we are quite biased, when we start a relationship. But we cannot stay in that way for the rest of our life. And then we have this challenge. Okay, when our eyes are, really good, we can clearly see all the weak points, even, tiny points of the other. So we can hear, the others nagging or whatever, complaints or blames. Then how we can still, having those senses of good, good working senses, how we can maintain our relationships. One important message that we can learn from the Buddha about how we can transform any of our relationships for spiritual growth is to truly understand that our relationships are not really about our personal happiness. This is a misunderstanding that we all have. We think that our relationships are source of our personal happiness. So relationships are not primarily about personal happiness. Of course, they can give us happiness. But the main motive for a develop a relationship or to maintain relationship should not be personal happiness. Because it's going to be quite selfish motive on that, right? And then the relationships are primarily about actually growing, about learning. And of course, relationships can really provide us happiness, but not when we use them as vehicle of our personal happiness. The moment you start to use your relationship for your own personal happiness, and then you don't really experience happiness, you are going to experience challenges and pain. But the moment that we open our heart and want to see the relationships as a way to learn about human mind, and as a way to be helpful, and as a way to develop our understanding, and then of course relationships can provide us happiness too. So it's a kind of byproduct. The main focus is not the personal happiness, but the personal growth. So because each person, when we are dealing with each person can teach us so many things. So it's about learning. So there are two ways that we can learn from relationships. One is learning from others. The other one is learning through others. Two different ways of learning. Learning from others means in any person's life, there are so many good qualities, so many good virtues. So when we live with other people, even our own partners, family members, friends, teachers, when we see good qualities in them, we can be inspired by those good qualities. We can appreciate these qualities and be inspired in how kind he is, how generous he is, how patient he is or she is. And we can be inspired by them, and then we can learn from them by observing them, how they handle issues, how they react to situations, and how they solve their problems. So, and with our own partners, with our family members or friends, teachers or neighbors, we can be inspired by their good qualities and we can learn from them. But you will get more opportunities not to learn from them, but learn through them. That's the second one. Learn through them. That means that's not something you'll be inspired by them. You begin to see weakness in others. And you begin to experience challenges when you are with them. You experience difficulties, or like feeling of hurting. And then there's a different kind of learning can be done in that situation. So whenever we have this kind of difficulty, we should learn that this difficulty is telling me that there's a room in me to grow, to develop. And still in this relationship is not smooth. There are some change needed to be happen in order to make this relationship smooth. So there's still some grossness, of course, in both parties, but you can be responsible for your own grossness, your own lack of lubricants. So whenever we are experiencing difficulty or pain or suffering in related relationship, that point to us not only the weakness of the other person, but also in an area that we can work on. So relationships are like mirrors. They're actually like helping us to see ourselves more clearly. Because when we are with different people, different part of us come out. Like when you are in the temple with us, a certain aspect of you will come to the surface. When you are with your family members, not this one, different aspect of you will come out. When you are with neighbors, whoever, so it depends on the person. Whoever the person we are with, that the other person has the ability to instigate certain part of us, certain even tendencies in us. So like other people are like mirrors. They help us to recognize our own patterns and own tendencies. So if we have that wisdom, that viewpoint, and then we can learn through others, like being with them and going through this, experiencing kind of conflict, kind of some kind of tension, and then using that tension. Okay, let me recognize what is the part in me that still need some work. So others can help us learn about ourselves, learn about our own mind. So that's a different kind of learning. Learn through them. So what's the problem again? Can relationships be burden or a blessing? So what we can do here, without letting the relationships or the others to like decide what kind of emotion that I'm going to have, and what we can do actually, take charge of our relationship. Take charge of our relationship means that not waiting the other persons or other people to like decide how we feel. We take the charge. Like we start our interaction. Let's say, if you're living together early in the morning, so either you can wait for the other person to say good morning to you and make you happy. If that person didn't say that, ignore you and then left home, you'll be miserable and unhappy. So you gave that so you didn't take the charge of the relationship. You wait the other person to make you happy or unhappy. But taking charge of the relationship, that you decide, okay, before the other person's greet you good morning, you greeted the other person good morning, and you start this mood. Sometimes still that will not be enough to change the other person. Yeah. But in most cases, those that taking charge, initiating the good response, initiating the good interaction will work. If will not be successful in the beginning, but continue, you will find it successful. So what I'm telling you actually is a more kind of make use of your relationship. It's kind of selfish thing to do. If the other person has great qualities, make use of that great qualities. Inspired by them, try to follow it, appreciate it, and try to behave like the other person, try to learn from that person. If the other person has challenging qualities and difficult personality, make use of him or her to train yourself. It's a kind of selfish kind of way, but actually it's not really selfish at the end, because you make use of that person to train yourself, to develop your own qualities. Once you develop those qualities, and the other party will benefit. So I ask you, make use of others. Make use of, feel free, make use of others. But to train our own mind, and then the others will also benefit from that. Because in any bad qualities in others, also a good reflection to see our own mind, and also to identify area that we still need work in. There's another saying that one day a young man went to his grand uncle. He's going to get married, and he asked, uncle, you have lived a family life for many years, and can you give me a piece of advice how best to live my family life? He said that never criticize any weakness of your partner. He said, why? You have to be thankful to those weaknesses in the other person, because that person has those weaknesses, or maybe that husband or wife has those weaknesses. He found you, otherwise he will find a better husband or wife. So you have to be thankful to those weaknesses. It is because of this her or his weakness that he found me. He didn't find better husband or wife than me. So you have to be grateful to those qualities. So whenever we see those weaknesses, we have to be like empathize with them, and those are the good opportunities for us to learn through them, and try different ways, try to be skillful in different ways to like how to handle it, how to go through that situation, and then help the other person also to grow. It's not about criticizing, not about correcting. It's a wrong way of approaching. We don't want to correct anybody, but we can be helpful for the other person to come out his own weakness. It's like if we approach with the mindset of correcting, that is not smooth. That's going to be a lot of challenge. It's going to be challenging. So maybe if we start as being helpful, maybe we can do it a little bit. The other one, relationships are the best opportunities for us to see our ego coming out. Our ego most of the times come to the surface when we are interacting with others. Imagine we having an argument with your colleague, with your neighbor, with your partner, husband or wife. When we are having an argument, those are the moments we can see our own ego is coming out, and even though you know that what you are arguing for is really is not valid, but the moment you identify yourself with the argument, you will find all kind of reasons to win the argument. Not because it's really something valuable, but you just need to win. You didn't like to be embarrassed. You don't like to be defeated. So those are the good moments to really, even in a very intimate relationships. We want to win. We want to win the arguments. Sometimes we can be open and actually see, if we can make an effort to see the matter clearly, but most of the time when we start an argument, it's not a matter of understanding what is the real case. It's about personal, you can say glory, or it's ego. So we try to soothe our ego in our relationships. That is where all kind of problems start. So that's a good thing to feel it. I'm in a relationship with somebody, with partner, with family, and this is not a time to soothe my ego. And then understand it, recognize it, and take a break. I'm not here to win. I'm here to be happy. Right? And then sometime you can let go of something. I have another story. One time a millionaire who had a construction site and brought his wife to that construction site one day. And when they were working along the construction site, there was a worker with his helmet and with his dress, and he waved at the wife hi Emily. And then she looked at her, do you remember me? She said, no. We used to date when we were in high school. And she said, oh, are you Thomas? Ah, yes. and they recognize each other and they say hi, and then that's all. All of the way, the millennial husband said to the wife, you are so lucky to marry me. Otherwise, you'll be the wife of that construction worker. And then the wife said that, you should be very lucky to marry me. Otherwise, not you, that construction worker will be the millionaire. So the relationship can benefit both parties, not one party. So in an argument, we try to be the first, we try to be the winner. That's the beginning of the journey of suffering. But if you can start to feel the other person and try to, be in peace and happiness, maybe we can lower our need to win and then solve the problem. So I think the best example for us to learn how a relationship can be a blessing, can be a support for our spiritual practice is not other than the Buddha himself. Before he became the Buddha, Buddha was a son, he was a husband, he was a father. And the way the Buddha, before becoming the Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, and who is his wife? Siddhartha, who's Siddhartha's wife? Yashodhara. If we really understand how this couple, the Prince Siddhartha and Yashodhara, how they help each other's spiritual growth, that will be the best example for us to live our life and use our own relationships for our spiritual growth. Not as a burden to our spiritual growth, but as a blessing to our spiritual growth. The Prince Siddhartha and Yashodhara, they met in a very special way. And those days, when the prince wants to get married, the prince will invite all the princes of the kingdom and neighboring kingdoms, and then the prince will perform the best skill of him, and then try to inspire all the princes. And then he has a chance to choose whoever inspired, princess. What happened was that there was such a big ceremony, and this father, the King Suddhodana, announced this ceremony, and so many princes from all over the subcontinent came to this ceremony because they want to see how this prince is doing. And he, in front of everybody, he performed all his skills as a young boy, so very in his prime youth. And then at the end of all his exhibition of different kind of archeries and different kind of skills, and all the princes stood up. They had their garland with them. So it's like putting the garland, Nowadays you will bring a ring and ask, will you marry me? Right? So those days they were bringing garlands. And so all the princes stood up with their garlands. They really want this young boy, this skillful and strong man to be their husband. And then everybody was waiting. Prince Siddhartha chose Yashodhara. It's kind of choosing a mutual choice. Yashodhara chose Prince Siddhartha, and Prince Siddhartha chose Yashodhara. And the reason that she chose Prince Siddhartha was that she knew because Prince Siddhartha was her cousin actually, the maternal cousin, right? Maternal cousin. And then she knew that Prince Siddhartha was a different person. Because from childhood, Prince Siddhartha was different. There was an argument between Yashodhara's brother and Prince Siddhartha when they were still teenagers. The Devadatta shot an arrow to a swan. Remember, Amanda? Yeah. What happened? The swan fell down, right? And then Prince Siddhartha ran to that swan and took that swan and took away the arrow, and he wanted to save him. And the Devadatta, the brother of Yashodhara, came running behind him and demanded, "This is my swan. I'm the one who shot at it." And then Prince Siddhartha said that, "No, this stone doesn't belong to anybody. It's not belong to you. I'm going to heal him. So there was an argument. According to the tradition, whoever is shot, the arrow has the right of the animal. But Prince Siddhartha was arguing in the court, in the in the royal court, that this shouldn't be belong to Devadatta. He was criticizing the traditional values, those systems, and that inspired Yashodhara. And there were so many other stories that how he refused to eat the kind of refined meat in the palace, and how he wanted servants to provide the same food, because the royal family has a different kind of food, and different, depending on your rank, there were different kind of food was served in the palace. And Prince Siddhartha was against that. He was rebellious, and he said he wanted everybody to eat the same thing. So the Princess Yashodhara knew about those things. She really wanted, to be with a man. So then they got married. And of course, we didn't have so many details how they actually lived their married life, but I'm sure that they had so many discussions, so many moments in their so many times they spent together to discussing about human suffering, discussing about inequality, all kind of things, and then they were married for let's say for about 15 years, 16 years. And they were married for about 15 years. And during these 15 years of marriage, how many things they may have shared? So Prince Siddhartha really wanted to find a solution for human suffering. And when he saw these, old people, sick people, dead people, he was really concerned about humanity. And he wanted to find a way out. And Prince Siddhartha, Princess Yashodhara, shared his interest. So they were discussing about that. And at the end, Prince Siddhartha decided to leave the palace, to take some time off to find the solution for this. And traditionally, we have different literature describing how Yashodhara was so supportive of this Prince Siddhartha decision to go out and find a solution to be hoping that he will come back. But of course, in later songs and literature, Princess Yashodhara was portrayed as a woman who was crying, crying for losing husband. But I don't think that is the real case, because when you really read what really happened, after Prince Siddhartha became an ascetic, Princess Yashodhara was taking care of the baby and was also checking on ascetic Siddhartha what he's doing. And when she heard that the ascetic Siddhartha is wearing the single cloth, like not the ornaments and whatever, the simple piece of cloth, or like a yellow robe, or like a dyed cloth, and she also decided to wear the same kind of cloth. She removed all her ornaments and everything, and she started to wear very simple dyed cloth. And when he heard that ascetic Siddhartha is now practicing moderation in eating, he only eats once a day. In the palace, she decided to eat once a day. When he heard that Prince Siddhartha is actually sleeping on low, like in a simple, low beds, or simple blankets, and she decided to sleep in the palace in that way. Like when ascetic Siddhartha was practicing his spiritual path in the forest, she was practicing her own spiritual path in the palace. So they were supporting each other. And sometime when we read literature, it says that Prince Siddhartha left his family. It's almost like abandoned the husband, abandoned the wife and the newborn baby. And then we stop the story there. But we forgot that actually after ascetic Siddhartha, after he achieving his goal, this goal that he took for out of compassion for all sentient beings, and after he achieved that goal, he returned. He returned home. He came back. And then he took care of the son. And after he returned, the Prince Rahula, who was their son, And then son was given back to the Buddha by Yashodhara. And I took care of him for 7 years. Now it's your turn, in a way. Actually, then of course, from the 7 years onward, it is the Buddha who took care of Rahula, their son, not Yashodhara. So he really did not leave the family. He just away for 7 years. It is very normal for even today, right? You know, your husband will go overseas to work, and 5, 6, 7 years they are working there. And actually, Buddha had a special, Prince Siddhartha had a special mission. So in order to do that, he was like away from the family for about 6, 7 years. But once he fulfilled his goal for the whole sentient beings, he came back and returned. He shared what he realized. And when he returned home, his father welcomed him, and all the relatives welcomed him, and they had a nice ceremony. And then everybody came to welcome him, except Yashodhara. She was at her own room, didn't come out, only sent the son. And then in the meeting, Buddha asked, "Where is Yashodhara?" You know about the woman, right? So Yashodhara didn't come out. She was in her room, and she sent a message. And then the servants went to inform her that Buddha is downstairs. Why don't you go and greet him? Yashodhara said that if Buddha recognized any virtue in me, we recognize my practice, he should come to me, not me go there. In fact, what really happened? Buddha decided to go to the room of Yashodhara. And he instructed the other monks, when I go there, she has been missing me for so long, and now I'm the Buddha, no more the prince, no more her husband, but let her express her emotions. She will be emotional, but don't try to stop her. He instructed other disciples. He went into the room. Yashodhara, as the moment she saw the Buddha start to cry, and came and grabbed his legs and cry until the legs were wet. And Buddha let her cry, didn't allow anybody to disturb her. And after that, Buddha admired her dedication, her practice, and said, "I am